Good morning, everyone. This is Fallon Keith from the CMA Foundation. I'm the Grants Associate. I am here with Catherine Frizzell and Mary Overend from the CMA side. So they work for the Country Music Association. We asked Kat and Mary to be on this webinar today because they have really learned how to create marketing and communication plans around the industry side of our business, but have such an in-depth knowledge of how to create marketing and communication plans around any business. And so 2 weeks ago, we heard from Andrew Finlayson, who works for Smith Geiger, about how we adjust and make changes in this world of COVID, but even outside of COVID, and how we react to different things. And so Mary and Kat are here today to share with us a little bit behind the scenes of how they have created plans around the CMA side and how you all can utilize these different tools to help create plans around your business too. So Mary and Kat, I will let you kick it off.
Thank you, Fallon. So Fallon kind of summarized what we'll be talking about today pretty awesomely, but I'll go ahead and just give a little bit of a summary. So I think, she's right. It's whether you're making plans for an organization or for your classroom, you really are running a business. So that's what Mary and I are here to talk to you guys about today. We really will talk through how to create a proper marketing plan for individuals and or organizations that really want to speak about their business. We'll provide some tactics, best practices, etc. And hopefully you'll walk away today with some insight on how to make your business stand out. So that's our goal for today. Give you some quick intros of myself and Mary. So I'll start. My name is Catherine Frizzell. I am currently the VP of Marketing at CMA. I have really, I've been at CMA almost 16 years next month. So really grew up at CMA. I started at CMA as a membership assistant and kind of worked my way up the ladder. I had some amazing mentors along the way and truly love the organization and what we stand for at CMA. The CMA Awards is probably my favorite event that CMA does. You guys are likely know that happens in November each year, currently airing on ABC. It's a really fun night and it's a lot of hard work, but to see it all pay off is always really kind of a proud moment for the staff. So that's kind of my favorite event. I have a family, so I have 3 kids, a husband, 2 dogs and a cat. So we have a pretty hectic life outside of CMA. But yeah, it's a great, I can't say enough about our organization and how awesome it is. And obviously for somebody like me who has a family outside, it works pretty well. So I'm delighted to be here with you guys today, and I hope that you guys get some valuable information from today's webinar. At the very end, we'll have time for questions, and I certainly welcome you to ask any and all questions you have for Mary and myself. So I'll let Mary give her intro as well.
Hi, everyone. This is Mary Overend. I've been at CMA for just over 5 years and have a somewhat unique path to getting there. So I graduated from college in 2009 when the market was down and not a hot market for hiring, which unfortunately I think this year and next year's grads are going to experience too. But I did a couple of nonprofit internships in Atlanta, which led to a full-time position in marketing with Children's Healthcare of Atlanta. And then I spent about 3.5 years with Carter's and Oshkosh B'gosh, the children's clothing brand's corporate office, working on their digital marketing team, where I learned so much and was able to take experiences from both of those positions into CMA and the CMA Foundation, which I think worked out pretty well. My favorite event at CMA is CMA Fest, which is why I'm particularly sad it didn't get to happen this year. I just really love the marathon feel of it and getting to see all the faces of those country fans who have been excited for the event for many months, and seeing all the artists come together as a big family is really why I love that event. And then in terms of personal life, I have a dog who I'm a little bit obsessed with, and unfortunately he's sequestered upstairs because the lawn people are here today, and I'm afraid he would take over this webinar and bark, and you guys wouldn't be able to hear anything. But besides that, I enjoy spending weekends on the lake, kayaking, and I take a pottery class every week. So then it's been an opportunity to have a creative outlet every week. So now that you know a little bit about us, I'm just going to share the agenda for today. So what we're going to walk through, Catherine and I, is defining your goals, determining your successes, assessing all of your opportunities, actually creating a plan, and I think the secret, maybe most important part, is being prepared and flexible for changing that plan. Reporting results, and then as you mentioned, we'll take questions at the end. You can use the chat feature of this webinar throughout the duration of the webinar, and then Fallon can field the questions to us at the end. So feel free to use that chat feature at any time.
Great. So we'll jump right into defining your goals. So, you know, really when you're talking about what are your goals, you kind of need to answer these key questions that you see on the screen here. Really, you know, thinking through who your audience is. Do you have more than one audience group? If so, probably good to start thinking about if and how your messaging needs need to differ. You know, that could be anybody from students, principals, parents, media, you know, fans, et cetera, depending on your business. What exactly are you looking to accomplish? You know, what do you need to accomplish? Why are you looking to put, you know, this plan together? And we'll talk a little bit more about that. When do your goals need to be accomplished? Is there any major deadlines you need to keep in mind as you kind of navigate through the developmental phase? Why? What's your purpose? You know, this may be the most important question to answer of them all, honestly. It's like, why are you putting a plan together? And you know, of course, last but not least, where and how will you execute it? Is it all digital? Do you have a specific platform or platforms in mind? Would there be some sort of on-location element or a combination of both virtual and on-location? I think it's important to note that, you know, as you kind of define these goals, that not all of these may always be applicable to a project or a campaign or a task, and that's totally fine. It's just a good practice to kind of set your foundation of your campaign by walking through each of these questions. But, you know, if something doesn't apply, skip and keep on moving. Moving along to, you know, really to Mary's point, kind of determining what success looks like. What you're seeing on this screen is an example of our 2019 CMA Fest by the numbers document. And so really for us, it was, you know, these were kind of the big elements that we went into the event saying, these are the things that are important to us, and this is what's going to determine if we were successful in our campaign. So you'll see some examples there on the screen, but that could look like increased social media engagements. It could be tickets sold to a specific event, a specific amount of funds raised. You know, in the music education world, it could be more like a percentage of students graduated. If you're getting more parent engagement, more local officials engaged, if you're getting the news to report more, and maybe you're receiving more funding, those kinds of things. But setting these measurable goals at the beginning of your project or campaign really will help determine your level of success at the conclusion of the campaign. You know, I think it's great, you know, you may not always meet your goals, and that's okay too. And we'll talk a little bit about kind of assessing and really looking at those reporting metrics, and pivoting in the middle of a campaign sometimes is also necessary. We'll go on to the next. Really assessing your owned, earned, and paid opportunities. This is really important. We absolutely, everybody, no matter your business, you have all of these opportunities in front of you. And so I'll kind of give you just a bit of a definition of each of these and then walk through some examples. So for owned, these are the platforms that your business owns or maintains regularly, has direct control over the communication with these audiences. So here you can see, you know, those who visit websites, social media, email subscriber lists, could be app users, past ticket purchasers, could be, you know, that could include merch, F&B, it could be donors, things like that. earn, these are the opportunities that are really based on mutually beneficial relationships. So for example, in the CMA world, this could be our sponsors, marketing partners, radio or TV affiliates. In the music education world, that might be nonprofit partners, instrument companies, teachers, schools, parents, etc. And then last but not least, you have an opportunity to execute a paid campaign, which are really any budgeted dollars that you're spending in any space that helps achieve your set goals. So that could be print, outdoor, influencers, digital, specifically social media, for example, TV, radio. There's a lot of options there. And then I'll let Mary kind of walk us through some examples of some of those options.
Yeah, so here are some examples from the CMA side of some owned properties. Email marketing is really important to us. So here's an example from our Best of Fest email campaign. We have several websites, one for each of our major events. So CMA Awards, CMA Fest, CMA Country Christmas. Then we have an association website, cmaworld.com, a membership-facing website. Hopefully you have all visited cmafoundation.org. That's a beautiful website with a lot of information. And then occasionally we will have campaign-specific ones. So we recently had a 4-hour live stream called CMA Summer Staycay. So to support that campaign, we created a custom website, cmasummerstaycay.com, to host all the key information about what the event was, who was going to be appearing, what the content was, and all sorts of stuff. So that was a really beautiful website that our team put together. Social media is obviously a big one. For the past 10 years, has been an important vehicle for people to communicate with their key constituents. And then a little bit unique for our business is we have an app specifically for the CMA Fest that has things like stages and schedules, where to find food and beverages, purchasing merchandise. The example you see here is we actually use that platform to leverage promotion of this summer staycay in July. So we worked with our app developer to flip the look of it, which is why you see that branding there, and then use the main screen to cross-promote other things going on. So the Best of Fest TV special, CMA Fest 21 passes going on sale for next year. And one thing I would just say for you is I think social media, people spend a lot of time talking about social media so much that I think some of the other platforms get forgotten. And I'm a big proponent of email marketing. That's something that people have actually said, yes, I want you to take up space in my inbox. So I would encourage you all to spend time really focusing on what information is helpful to people who subscribe to your email list and actually giving it to them. Other examples for you might include any student-teacher platforms, and then things like alumni social media pages. I'm a member of a couple of those from high school and extracurricular activities that I was involved in throughout school. And really, I become an advocate because I appreciate seeing what the organizations are still doing with their current students and participants. From an earned perspective, obviously Kat walked through some examples. This is one example from our CMA Awards 50th Forever Country song and music video we put out with, I believe it was 30 to 35, really notable country music artists. And a big piece of that campaign was reaching out to each of those teams and asking them to support in various ways. So what you're seeing here is some examples of those social media posts from those artists. We realize that we are in a lucky and unique position in that we are able to reach out to these artists. But for you, that can include things like parents, again, alumni, current students, all of whom are advocates of your business and can be leveraged in similar ways. Another major thing that we put together is what we call promo tools, which is essentially like a digital toolkit. So we compile things like digital assets, suggested copy, and we put that all together and send it out to our sponsors, partners, media, CMA members, and even our own employees so that they can help us in promotion. So we're really trying to put everything in one box with a pretty bow on it and give it to them so that we're making it easy when we ask for this earned support. And then from a paid perspective, this is an example from the CMA Awards last year of our overall spin campaign, which we execute in conjunction with our partners at ABC. So your paid campaign could be a variety of things, or it could be that you only spend in the digital space. It really depends. It goes back to those goals and what you're trying to accomplish and what you want your end result to look like. So this can certainly vary, but just as an example, this was how we spent to support CMA Awards last year. Radio, as you can see, is still a big component of country music. Country music listeners skew more radio than some other genres, so that's why we still spend in that space. But for other companies, they may not be spending any time in radio. And then you see 41% was digital. That can be a variety of things. So that can include advertising placement in social media platforms, digital streaming platforms, Google advertising. All sorts of things are kind of included in that one light blue box of digital. Now, was there anything else that you wanted to come in on in terms of radio and cable that's a little bit more your expertise?
I just would, maybe add that part of our overall strategy when it comes to our partners in general is that we really try to leverage those paid relationships for additional earned support. So again, specific to CMA and the business we're in, we have really strong valued relationships with our radio and DSP partners and even some of the social networks. And so as much as possible, we're constantly trying to see, like, how can we get the biggest bang for our buck, and how can we make sure we're providing these partners with some really valuable tools to help promote whatever it is that we are asking them to promote. So that's just something to keep in mind whenever you kind of do put that bigger plan together.
Awesome.
Cool. So creating the actual plan. So we've walked through really just taking everything you've assessed, discovered, and decided, and that would be your goals plus what Mary just walked us through, and the owned, earned, and paid opportunities. Then thinking through what that timeline should look like, and that's going to lead you to the results place. So kind of putting those pieces together, we'll look at the next slide, which really is probably something we have learned that is most important in any campaign or project that you're tackling. You've got to be prepared, and you've got to be flexible. It helped us a ton, through all the different campaigns we've done, but specifically, I'd say I'm the most proud of us from this past year's CMA Fest postponement announcement. But really, once you walk through those who, what, when, why, where goals, sometimes they change. Sometimes things beyond your control will impact them and influence them. And so just being prepared for those potential roadblocks will certainly help set you up for an overall successful campaign. I think we think of things, when you're being flexible and you're pivoting and adjusting on the fly, we do not see this as a weakness, but rather, an indicator of strength. And so hopefully you guys would feel the same way, but that's something that I cannot recommend enough, is to not to let that get you down or be frustrated by that. I don't know any campaign that goes perfectly how you planned it, unfortunately. And so I think being ready to change and to pivot as needed is really key.
Yeah, so to Kat's point, what you're seeing here is some examples of some consumer-facing announcements that we made about the 2020 CMA Fest. So there was a full communication timeline that was kind of happening in the background and before this actually went out to the public. So everything from key CMA staff being in charge of communicating with specific stakeholders. So those stakeholders included city officials, CMA board members and members, all the artist managers and publicists for artists who had been booked, but we actually hadn't at that point announced any lineup. Vendors, so that could include staging vendors, food and beverage vendors, merchandise vendors, things like that. Our sponsors and partners, obviously an important piece of the puzzle, and wanted to make sure that they were fully aware of what our plans were. We really lean on temporary staff during CMA Fest in the number of the hundreds, so making sure that we were communicating appropriately with those people to let them know what our plans were. And then again, last but not least, is communicating with consumers and ticket purchasers. So we had kind of a multi-pronged approach to how we communicated with them. from social media posts to emails directly to ticket purchasers on how they could request refunds if they wanted them. We flipped our CMA.com website, that's the example you see on the right side of your screen, to really focusing on answering all the questions that people probably had about what does it mean that CMA Fest wasn't going to happen this year. We had some custom FAQs. In the lower right corner, you see a COVID-19 update. This was actually a virtual assistant that we had set up. So a customer service solution in which you could ask for specific questions, and the system would populate some answers, and then if it wasn't able to answer with some pre-populated answers, it would ping us so that we can answer it in a more custom way. And then in terms of messaging, to Kat's point, we really shifted in how we were approaching how we speak to our consumers. So if you remember back in March when the country kind of shut down and everybody had a lot of uncertainty, you know, we really focused on appreciation of the fans. We received so much love from people when we announced that CMA Fest wasn't happening, you know, an equal amount of disappointment, but also appreciation that we were making the right decision. And generally just a lot of love around people who were excited to come next year and get to listen to their favorite artists and all that sort of fun stuff. We then shifted to focusing on really repurposing some fun CMA Fest memories. So pulling up some memorable moments from previous years and servicing those via social media channels. From a playlisting standpoint, we have this great campaign around greetings from home. So it was a little bit of a play on like, here's a playlist from your living room versus your kitchen, and really encouraging people to lean into the music during this time of uncertainty. And then, as previously mentioned, we had a wonderful live stream called CMA Summer Staycay. So really bringing the family together from a country music family, but also for families at home to be able to spend some time with country music and really just kind of escaping everything that's happening in the world. From your perspective, you know, this could be what you guys are experiencing right now. So I think there's a lot of uncertainty around some school systems of whether it's going to be all virtual or a mix of virtual or in person, and obviously a need to be flexible in how you communicate with your students versus teachers versus administrators, and then a need to incorporate more compassion into the messaging, and we certainly experienced this. So, you know, changing the wording to be more positive and engaging, and ultimately, as an example for you, keeping music in the classrooms this year, next year, and beyond.
And last but not least, you're going to want to gather final metrics that correlate with your goals and prepare those, you know, to share those successes and key learnings with your stakeholders. You know, data can really come from a variety of sources, and sometimes it can be a very manual pull. That's something we've certainly learned on our end, that sometimes there's a lot of you know, automatic systems or ways that you can, platforms that assist in those efforts, and sometimes those work, but sometimes it's also just okay to do it manually and to take a little bit more time to really dig through those. That's kind of the way we handle specifically with our social media analytics. We pull those pretty manually on our end, but it really does help kind of paint the picture and helps us tell the story to our constituents. So really just thinking through how you're going to pull out the most important pieces of the story once you kind of dig in and start to identify those key successes and learnings, making sure you're sharing those with your constituents, whether that's your fellow teachers, your parents, you know, principals, etc., any outside partners that make sense to share that with. I think, you know, never be afraid to share good news with any of your constituents. That's something that, you know, they don't know if you don't share it. So able to get the good news out, you know, whether that's we received additional funding or, you know, got additional, secured some additional media support, whatever that looks like, you know, received additional parental engagement. That's something for, you know, worth sharing. So kind of putting some sort of report that really makes it easy for folks to dive into and to see what the learnings and wins were is something that we try to practice on every campaign. So That kind of concludes our presentation. We certainly, we shared a lot of our experience here at CMA and how it relates to our campaigns, and hopefully there's ways that you can take those learnings and apply them to your specific situation, your specific business. We'd love to answer any questions that you guys have for us. If you have any, we're happy to take those now.
Thank you so much, Kat and Mary. I just wanted to say that the things that you all did for CMA Fest this year were some of the most, I personally think, brilliant things that CMA has done in my time here. And that's not me bragging on my own organization. I work for the foundation side. So really the work that y'all did to think ahead and figure out how to communicate to each of the audiences that CMA serves, I just think was incredible. And definitely something that nonprofits can take into perspective and put into practice as they're moving forward into providing programming in this new situation, and how teachers can be talking to parents and administrators. So thank you all so much for sharing your knowledge with us today. Some questions.
Yeah, Fallon, I wanted to add something that we should absolutely point out. We would be omitting a big piece of the puzzle is that for us, the way that CMA works, of course, is that was a true team effort for the CMA Fest announcement. So it was marketing, PR, leadership, strategic initiatives department. There were a lot of departments involved with getting that messaging right and getting the timing right. And I think that's really key in any situation, whatever your business is, to have transparency and openness and communication between all the key individuals, that make up kind of that business or organization is really critical.
Yeah, that's perfect. Okay, so some questions that we have. How do you decide what messaging is right for what audiences?
That's a really great question. Mary, maybe I'll start and then you certainly can chime in. I call internally, Mary's the messaging queen, especially when it comes to our fan messaging. We have a lot of communication internally that's drafted and we have a lot of audiences at CMA. We have our fans, and then we have media, and we have partners, and we have members, and our staff. So there's a lot of different audiences that we continuously serve. I think we kind of start, for us, it's working internally and kind of starting with some base messaging that hits some key elements that we need to include. And then we start identifying which audiences need to receive that message. And, then that's when really, if it's like fan related, for example, Mary will jump in and kind of put a bit of our fan voice on. I think you have to have a very consistent and specific voice for your audiences. And so Mary's done a really great job at kind of keeping that consistent. And I will say it's been great to have some outside perspective. It's, sometimes you get a little close to things, and when you're able to kind of step back and you hear some other fresh perspective, that's really kind of how we got to the place at CMA Fest. We just started to focus on taking into consideration what the outside environment of the world is, and how we need to be speaking to our audiences, with that in consideration. So that's kind of part of our process. Mary, anything you'd add on that?
I would just say, to answer that question, I would just really encourage people to listen to what your audiences are asking for. And it can vary by audience, obviously, but, just as an example of CMA Fest, there are some Facebook groups that are specific to people who are attending the festival or wanting to attend for the first time. And I actually sit in those groups kind of as a silent observer, but it is really educational to understand what questions somebody has who's never been before. Again, to Kat's point, I think a lot of us get into the bubble. She's been at CMA for 16 years. I've been there for 5 years. Sometimes I forget what it's like to go to a music festival, period, that's not our own. So what are those questions that people are asking? And it can vary from where do people stay in town to what's the food situation? Are there food trucks, or are there concession stands? Things that are pretty simple questions, but I think sometimes we forget about. And so I usually bubble those up and say hey, guess what? We don't have a really good answer for that on our website or in our FAQs. And so it's an opportunity for us to infuse some of those answers in and be able to answer for any future people who ask the same questions. And then things like, as an example for the CMA Awards, I think our awards production team are an incredible crew. They're obviously very aware of new music that's popular in that year and what people are kind of wanting to celebrate that year. But, you know, sometimes there might be like a cross-genre collaboration that maybe our own team hasn't thought of. And we see that a lot, like in our social media posts, that, you know, people are like, oh, what if you ever had this person and this person? And, you know, we have an opportunity to share that with our executive producer and our production team and say, hey, have you guys thought about this collaboration? So it's really all about listening to what people are asking for.
And this question kind of relates to what you all were just talking about, but do you see a benefit in separating those audiences even more, such as students, alumni, parents, community? Have you seen benefits to separating messages to those audiences for the same campaign?
I think so. I think, you know, I don't think we've always done, honestly, in past campaigns have done the best job. And that's kind of been some of our learnings along the way, is like, we should probably customize our messaging a little bit more. And I think when you do that, and when you listen to those, to the feedback from those audiences, like Mary said, I think you do have kind of a winning strategy that kind of gives them the information that they're looking for, but in the way that they need it. So talking to students would likely be very different than talking to their parents, or very different than talking to, you know, school administrators. And so I think, you know, sometimes it's a bandwidth and just takes a little bit more time, but I think in the end it's worth the additional effort, absolutely.
Yeah, and I think this is where email comes into play particularly, because you can segment your sends to specific audience members. And to Kat's point, the way you speak to an administrator is going to be very different to the way you speak to a student, and particularly depending on the age of the student. So obviously when I say emails, I'm thinking of older students, but you can really customize that messaging depending on, you know, what you're trying to communicate to them, and then what you're, you know, if you're looking for action in return from them, you can customize that messaging.
And then should you be changing messaging per platform that you use?
I've personally gone back and forth on this. I don't think it's necessary. And we've actually heard some affirmation of that from some platforms themselves. So we have a contact at Facebook who was saying, you know, there's really no reason why you should be spending time putting different content on your Instagram stories versus your Facebook stories. You know, you have different audiences there, and really it's an opportunity to cross promote between the two. So my gut would be, you know, that it's not completely necessary, but if you had the time and the desire to make it super different, that's also not a detriment either.
Okay. Well, I think that's all of the questions that we had from our group today. Kat and Mary, again, thank you so much. This information I think is invaluable to our group. They are working with so many different populations, and just seeing how you all have provided messaging for all of your different populations has been incredibly insightful. So thank you both so much for your time. And if y'all have any follow-up questions for us, just feel free to send them my way, and we will get them answered.
Awesome. Thank you guys for having us today.
Thank you, Fallon.
Thank you, Fallon.
And thank you for listening.